I left work with flour on my sleeves and my earbuds in. Nothing dramatic. I've been on my feet since stupid o'clock, baking and boxing and wiping the same counters twice because the morning manager liked to inspect with his finger like he was doing surgery. I just wanted to bust my bed in silence. At the stop, a guy stood too close, hoodie up, hands buried, pretending to scroll. The bench was empty. The sidewalk was wide. He still slid in behind my shoulder like he needed my body heat. I shifted. He shifted. I kept my eyes on the street and tried to act normal, even though my skin started crawling. When the bus came, he got on behind me, sat 2 rows back, didn't look out the window once. Not once. He didn't do the usual phone zombie thing either. He sat forward, elbows on knees like he was timing me. Every time I adjusted my bag strap, I saw him move in the glass reflection like we were linked. I got off early like always. He got off early too. That's when the music in my ears stopped being music. I pulled one bud out and listened. I heard his shoes land behind me, steady, not rushed, like he was confident I'd keep walking. I turned onto a side street I never take. He turned. I slowed like I was checking my pocket. He slowed. I sped up. He sped up. It wasn't subtle. It was fucking deliberate. I crossed at a red light like a dumbass because no cars were coming and my brain wanted distance right now. He crossed at the same red light, fast. Not a jog, just quick enough to tell me he could close the gap whenever he felt like it. I ducked into a 24-hour laundromat and pretended to check a vending machine. Bright lights, cameras, people. I thought that would reset the whole thing. The bell chimed and the warm, wet air hit me, soap and metal and damp socks. 2 guys sat by the dryers, staring at their phones. A woman folded towels without looking up. He came in, stood by the door, and scanned me like he was pricing meat. I slid behind a row of washers and called my manager instead of 911 because my brain went stupid. I don't know why. Habit. Embarrassment. Some dumb hope that a familiar voice would make me feel less alone. It rang out. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. My hand shook so hard I could barely hold the phone. I left this choking message, someone's following me, and the second I hung up, I wanted to swallow the whole phone. I looked up and the guy had moved closer. Slow, smiling, like he knew exactly what was happening in my head, like he knew I was trying to talk myself out of making a scene. He didn't pull a weapon. He didn't need to. The way he held that space between us felt like a hand on my throat. I tried to get the attention of the people sitting there. I cleared my throat. I scraped my shoe. I said louder, "Hey, can you?" And one of the dryer guys finally looked up with that irritated face like I'd interrupted his show. "Relax," he said, waving a hand at me like I was a stray. I told him I wasn't relaxing. I told him to just look at the dude by the door, and he looked for half a second, then looked away like he'd already decided he didn't want to be involved. The woman folding towels kept folding. The guy kept coming. I backed up until my hip hit a washer. My brain sprinted through options: scream, run, hit, freeze. I grabbed the nearest thing that wasn't bolted down, a metal laundry cart with rattly wheels, and I shoved it hard into his knees. The cart slammed with a sharp clang. He barked a curse and folded just enough for me to slip past. He reached out, not for me, for the cord of my earbuds hanging from my hoodie, and his fingers hooked it like it was nothing. I felt a quick tug of my ear, a sting, and then my music cut out completely. The earbuds were just gone, like he'd plucked them off me the way you pull a tag off clothing. Something in me snapped. I kicked the cart again, right into him, ugly and mean. I heard another curse, closer, and I didn't wait to see if anyone finally decided to help. I ran. I bolted out the back exit into the alley. The door banged behind me, and the cold air ripped into my lungs. The alley was slick. Trash bins. Ice patches. My shoes slapped and skidded, and I didn't care. I just went. I heard the laundromat door slam again, and I still didn't look back. Looking back felt like slowing down. I ran until my lungs burned and my throat tasted like blood. I cut corners wrong. I almost ate shit on a frozen curb. I kept my keys threaded between my fingers because I needed to believe I had something. I didn't stop until I hit a gas station with cameras and big windows and a cashier behind thick plexiglass. I shoved through the door and stood under the lights like they could save me. I tried to breathe quietly. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I stared out at the pumps. I expected him to appear at the edge of the light, hoodie up, smiling like it was funny. For a minute, nothing. Then a shadow moved near the trash can outside, and my whole body flinched like a dog waiting for a kick. I walked to the counter and tried to make my voice steady. The cashier looked at me, saw my face, and immediately got annoyed, like I was about to dump my chaos on her shift. "You buying something or what?" she snapped. I bought a water. I didn't want just so, I had a reason to stand there. I told her low that someone followed me. She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. "Call your boyfriend," she said through the hole in the plexiglass. That pissed me off so hard my vision went hot. I told her I don't have a boyfriend. I told her I need her to look at the cameras, and she shrugged like the cameras were decoration. I said, "Fine, I'll call the cops from right here then," and she finally moved, not to help me, but to glare like I was threatening her personally. The whole thing felt insane, me begging for basic help while she acted like I was shoplifting air. I pulled my phone out again and again. I still didn't dial 911. I dialed my manager again because my brain stayed stupid. This time he picked up half asleep and pissed. I started talking fast, and he cut me off, telling me not to call him about personal shit, telling me I'd better be at my shift tomorrow. I told him to shut up and listen. He laughed like I was being dramatic and hung up on me. Just like that, the familiar voice I wanted turned into another door slamming in my face. I stood right where the camera could see me, and I waited. 10 minutes. 15. I kept scanning the dark outside the windows. I kept checking my ears like I'd misremembered and the buds were still there. They weren't. That made it worse in this dumb, humiliating way. Like he'd stolen something small just to show he could touch me, and I wouldn't even stop him. When I finally left, I didn't go straight home. I looped. I doubled back. I crossed streets for no reason. I walked past lit windows and checked my reflection in every one, trying to catch him behind me. Twice I thought I saw a hooded shape a block back, and my stomach fell through the sidewalk. I stopped dead and turned, ready to swing my keys like a psycho, and it was just some guy walking his dog. He looked at me like I was the problem. I wanted to scream at him too. When I got home, my front door was still locked. Deadbolts set. Chain in place. For one stupid second, I felt relief, like I'd made it and the whole thing would shrink into a bad story I tell later. My window wasn't. Not shattered. Not wide open. Just unlatched. That tiny gap you don't notice unless you're looking for it. Cold air seeped in and pushed the curtain like something had brushed past. I didn't step fully inside at first. I stood in the doorway and listened, holding my keys so tight the metal bit into my fingers. Nothing. No footsteps. No TV. No faucet drip. I kicked my shoes off because I didn't want to slip if I had to run again. Then I walked room to room anyway, fast like ripping off a Band-Aid. Closet, clear. Bedroom, clear. Bathroom, clear. I opened the shower curtain like an idiot and almost laughed at how scared I was. I grabbed the cheapest kitchen knife from the block because I needed my hands to feel less useless. Then I flicked the kitchen light on and my eyes went straight to the table. On my kitchen table sat a flour-dusted paper bag for my job. I hadn't carried a bag home. I didn't buy anything. I didn't stop at my work. That bag should not have been there. It sat centered on the table like a gift, like somebody took their time placing it. My mouth went dry. I didn't touch it at first. I just listened for any sound that meant I wasn't alone. The apartment stayed quiet, too quiet, like it was holding its breath with me. I walked up slow because my legs didn't want to, and I pinched the top of the bag open with 2 fingers like it might bite. Inside, my own earbuds, neatly coiled like he'd taken them off my ears earlier and returned them to prove a point. The first week I felt fine. Then sleep started breaking into pieces, like someone ripped it up and scattered it. I'd blink at the stove and lose minutes. I'd find my hands in dishwater with no memory of turning the faucet on. I kept telling myself it was the hours, the heat, the constant clatter that never stops, because the alternative was admitting something was wrong with me. I work prep in a restaurant that calls itself upscale because the plates cost more. The back is still the back. Burners roaring, tickets spitting, everyone sharp-edged because we're always behind. At first it was small, the kind of thing you can blame on routine. I'd walk into dry storage for flour and come out with foil. I'd open the lowboy for herbs and find my hand already on a container I didn't remember grabbing. I'd check the ticket rail and realize I crossed off tasks I hadn't started yet. I started writing lists on my phone just to keep my head straight, and then I'd open the notes and see new lines I didn't remember typing. Short, blunt stuff like check freezer stack and stop looking up. People noticed, not in a caring way, in a don't become my problem way. A line cook barked at me for being slow on garnish. I barked back, and he slammed a hotel pan down so hard it jumped and sprayed crumbs everywhere. The manager wedged himself between us and told me, real calm, that if I couldn't keep it together, I could clock out. That pissed me off because I wasn't choosing any of this. I didn't clock out. I swallowed it and kept chopping because rent doesn't care if your head is sliding off your shoulders. One night, I heard the freezer door alarm from across the kitchen. I åkte over. The door was shut. The alarm kept screaming anyway. I yanked it open and cold air hit my face like a slap. There were boxes stacked wrong, labels facing in like someone hid what they were. Our freezer isn't big. You learn the stack. You learn where the backups sit. This looked like somebody had rearranged it with intent. I pulled one box down. It was empty but heavy, wet at the bottom. My stomach turned because it smelled like pennies and bleach. Like someone dumped coins into a bucket of sanitizer and dared me to breathe it in. I flipped the box, checked the seams, checked my gloves. The outside looked clean. No spill on the shelf. No mess on the floor. Just that dead weight in my hands and that smell punching the back of my throat. I sat on a rack and went straight to the office, said I needed to check the cameras. My supervisor didn't even turn around from the schedule. He said the cameras were for theft, not for me spiraling. I pushed harder than I should have. I told him someone was messing with storage and I wasn't taking the fall for it. He finally looked at me and his face tightened like I'd insulted him personally. He told me I looked wired and I needed to stop pounding energy drinks. He said it like that was the whole story, like tremors and missing time or just caffeine. I told him I wasn't high, I wasn't drunk, and I wasn't imagining a bleach smell in the freezer. He leaned back in his chair and said if I kept causing drama, he'd send me home and cut my shifts. After that, every time I walked past the freezer, I felt my body tense like it expected the alarm. I started checking the stack at the start and into my shift. Some nights it looked normal. Some nights the labels were turned in again like a secret. I'd fix them and come back later and they'd be wrong again. When I pointed it out, a cook said I was the one doing it to fuck with everybody. I told him to prove it. He laughed and said my reaction was proof, like fear was a confession. That's when the people that aren't there things started. Not full-on figures you can point at. More like motion in the wrong place. A shape in the dish pit. A head ducking behind the speed rack. A shoulder sliding past the doorway by the employee bathrooms. My body would react before my brain could catch up, and I'd spin around ready to snap at somebody for being in my way, and there'd be nothing but heat and noise. Once I followed the movement into the back hallway by the bathrooms and mop closet. Nobody. I checked the doors, checked the mop closet, checked behind stacked chairs like an idiot. Nothing. When I walked back out, 2 cooks were staring at me like I'd just screamed. I hadn't. I don't think I had. I tried to prove to myself it was stress. I cut caffeine. I forced myself to eat. I took melatonin. I still woke up with my jaw sore and my phone in my hand, screen lit like I'd been reading something in the dark. I checked my browser history and see searches I didn't remember making: bleach smell freezer, metallic blood odor, and twice, how to make someone forget. That last one made me sit up in bed and stare at my own hands like they belonged to somebody else. It got worse at work because the kitchen doesn't have patience for weird. I get told to grab something from the walk-in, and I'd come back, and someone would be shouting that I'd been gone forever. I'd look at the clock, and it would say 3 minutes had passed. Then I'd check my time card at the end of the shift, and see, I'd taken a break I didn't remember clocking out for. My supervisor accused me of stealing time. I told him to pull the camera and prove it. He smiled like he'd been waiting for that and said, real flat, that the cameras showed me standing there doing nothing, just staring at the freezer doors like I was listening. I asked to see it. He said no. He said he didn't have to play therapist for me. The last shift, I showed up early because I couldn't stand being late and giving them another reason to call me a fuck up. I went to my locker and found a prep note taped to it in my own handwriting, "Don't go home." Same sharp block letters I use on labels. Not panicked, not cute, a warning. My throat went dry. I ripped it off, laughed like an asshole, and shoved it in my pocket like it was trash. I worked anyway, because that's what I do when I'm scared. I move. I stay busy. I try to outrun my own head. I prepped onions until my eyes burned. I banged out sauces by muscle memory. I kept checking the time on the wall clock, and it kept jumping. Once I looked down and realized I'd relabeled an entire rack of containers with dates that weren't even right, like my hand had done it while my brain was elsewhere. A cook grabbed one and asked why the label looked like it was written by a robot. I told him to put it back and stop touching my shit. He told me to relax. I told him to fuck off. The manager heard and chewed me out in front of everyone, quiet and mean, like he wanted me to feel small. By the end of the night, my supervisor pulled me aside and said I was off, and I was making the line nervous. I said I was doing my job. He said, barely, and told me to go home and sleep before I hurt somebody. I wanted to spit in his face for that. Instead, I clocked out and walked to my car, shaking with anger. I ripped the note back out of my pocket in the parking lot. Don't go home. My own handwriting. I laughed again, louder this time, like laughing could cut the cord. I drove home anyway. My apartment door stood open. Not kicked in, just open like I'd left it. Inside, every cabinet was open. Every knife I owned sat on the counter, cleaned, lined up points facing the sink. The sight hit me so hard my legs went weak. It wasn't a messy break-in. It wasn't a rummage. It was a display. On the fridge was another note. Same handwriting, same sharp block letters. You did this. You just don't remember. I stood there with my keys clenched, so hard they bit into my palm. I leaned in close, and my stomach flipped because the paper smelled like the freezer. I rubbed my thumb across the ink, and it didn't smear, like it had been written hours ago, not days. I lifted one of the knives just to prove my hand still obeyed me. The handle was cold and dry. No fingerprints, no grease, clean like somebody cared. I set it back exactly where it was because moving anything felt like stepping into a trap. I realized my own hands smelled faintly metallic like pennies, and I couldn't remember washing them when I got home. I backed toward the door like I could just undo the last 10 minutes, but the hallway outside felt just as wrong, like my neighbors would see me and decide I was the problem. My phone kept slipping because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I walked the place anyway, room by room, because my body needed to see it. Bedroom empty. Bathroom empty. Closet empty. No busted window. No missing stuff. Just open cabinets and that line of knives like teeth. I checked my phone with numb fingers and saw things that didn't fit. A photo of the freezer taken from my angle, my hand in frame. A couple calls made at hours I was supposed to be asleep. A half-typed note that just said don't. I tried to drag my memory back like rewinding a tape that got chewed, and all I got were flashes with no sound. Cold air, white boxes, my own hand moving fast. I called 911 with my hands shaking so hard I dropped the phone twice, and I still don't know if I was the threat or the target. A girl asked me to escort her to her car because a guy keeps showing up. She wasn't crying. She just grabbed my sleeve outside the classroom building and said it like she was sick of repeating it. I'd done 100 escorts. Usually it's a drunk ex or some creep who backs off once there's a uniform nearby. This didn't feel like that. This felt practiced. I told her okay, and we walked. She pointed. Older sedan, parked crooked, engine idling, headlights off. It sat angled toward the doors like it was watching the flow. I looked for a student sticker, a permit, anything. Nothing. Just dark glass and that low hum you feel in your teeth when you stand too close. As we passed, the driver lifted his phone and filmed us through the windshield. Not sneaky, not low. He held it up and tracked us like he was recording an animal. I hit the glass with my flashlight. The glare blew out the view for a second, but his hands didn't drop. No jump, no flinch. I wanted to yank the handle and order him out, but campus policy is a leash. We're not sworn, we don't have cuffs, and every time somebody in our department gets proactive, they get written up for liability. So I did the only thing I could do in that moment. I walked her faster, kept myself between her and the car, and kept my radio hand ready. I got at her car, stood between her door and that sedan, watched her get in and pull out. The sedan didn't follow. It just stayed there, idling like the point wasn't her leaving. The point was me noticing. Back at the office, I wrote it up. Suspicious vehicle, driver recorded escort, possible stalking. I included the make, color, where it was parked, and the plate as best I could. I hated how useless it looked on paper. I handed it to my supervisor and told him the guy didn't even try to hide. He skimmed it and shrugged. You can't do shit without a crime. I argued. Loud. I told him filming someone walking to their car is a threat. He told me to calm down and stop playing cop. I told him he was being a lazy bastard. He stared at me like I'd insulted his mother and said, "Do your route." Then he did the thing he always did when he wanted to end a conversation. He turned his chair like I wasn't there. It made my hand shake. Next night, the same sedan sat closer to the building like it learned my routine. Headlights off again. Engine running again. It was positioned to see the main doors and the path to the student cars. I tried to take a picture of it from a distance. My phone camera kept hunting focus on the dark glass and then blowing out on my own flashlight. The one clear thing in every shot was the mud on the plate. I walked up with my flashlight anyway. The plate should have been readable. It wasn't. Mud covered only the numbers, smeared cleanly like someone took time with it. The rest of the plate was spotless. That's what freaked me out, how deliberate it was. Fresh too. I could see the smear marks like a fingerprint. I tapped the window and told him to move along. He didn't answer. He just raised the phone again and filmed me this time. I could see my own reflection in his windshield, a sad little security guard with a cheap light, trying to look bigger than he was. I felt my temper spike, and I hated how easy it was for him to pull it up. I stepped back because I'm not getting killed over a parking lot staring contest. The girls stopped coming to class. I noticed because I kept scanning faces after that, like I could undo my own worry by seeing her walk out. I checked the escort log and stared at her name a long time. I thought about calling the number she'd given at check-in, then remembered we don't keep those numbers unless dispatch logs them. Our dispatch is a bored student worker with a headset. Her professor showed up at our office a few days later. He stood in the doorway and asked if I'd seen her. He said her name, not the student, like it was personal. I knew exactly who he meant, and I lied. I said no. I said I hadn't seen her. I did it because I didn't want the extra problem and because I didn't want anyone pulling the escort log and sticking me to it like a hook. The lie tasted like metal as soon as it left my mouth. The professor's face tightened. He said her roommates said her stuff was still in the dorm. He asked what security was doing. I snapped that we aren't police. He snapped back, "Then what are you?" It turned into a stupid argument in a hallway while a girl was missing. He left disgusted. My supervisor watched the whole thing from behind the desk and later told me I escalated a customer. Customer, like a missing person is a service ticket. 2 weeks later, I reached into my uniform pocket at the start of shift and found a locker key that wasn't mine. Cheap key, plain ring, no tag. I emptied my pockets on the bench, my keys, gloves, pen, and that thing sat there like it belonged. I checked my jacket, checked my bag, checked my car. Nothing else was out of place. I asked around. Nobody claimed it. People joked. One guard said maybe I had a secret admirer. I told him to shut the fuck up. I did try the key once on a couple lockers in the rec building hallway, just to see if it was random or specific. It clicked in one lock like it knew where it was supposed to go, and I pulled back like I'd touched a hot wire. I didn't open it. I didn't want whatever was inside to become my responsibility. My supervisor walked past later, saw the key on my ring, and didn't react. Not even curiosity, just nothing, like he'd already seen it. A few nights after that, I came out to my car and found a folded campus map tucked under my wiper blade. Folded neat, not stuck by accident. Someone had highlighted a route in red marker. My route, not a general loop. My exact patrol path, down to the dumb little pauses where I double-check the sticky service door, where I radio in under the camera dome, where I always stop to log a checkpoint. There were even tiny hash marks by the spots where I usually stand still for 10 seconds because I'm listening for doors closing. Whoever did it knew how I move when I think nobody's watching. I brought the map inside and slammed it on my supervisor's desk. I told him someone was tracking me and I was done being brushed off. He leaned back and said I was stressed and reading into it. I told him to stop saying that like it fixes anything. I told him I was calling city police. His face changed for half a second, just a flash of irritation. Then he smoothed it out. He said flat, "Don't make this bigger than it is." I told him it was already bigger than me. He told me, "You want to keep this job? You stay in your lane." That's when my anger turned into something colder. So I started changing my route. I cut through buildings I didn't use. I doubled back. I stopped logging in real time. I wanted the sedan to miss me once. I even swapped shifts with another guard, so my hours changed. The sedan still showed up in the right place, like it got the update before I made it. I'd switch sides of the lot, and it would be there the next night, angled to watch whatever entrance I was about to check. The plate stayed smeared with fresh mud, perfectly over the numbers, every time. I watched the lot cameras from the office between rounds. Our system lags and drops frames, but you can still see patterns. The sedan always arrived during the little dead spots in the feed, like it knew where the blind seconds lived. I tried to pull the footage one night, and the time window I needed was just gone. Not corrupted, not glitchy, missing, like someone trimmed it clean. I asked IT the next day, and they acted confused and told me sometimes the server overwrites. Funny how it never overwrote. The professor came back again. He said she still hadn't shown. He asked me one more time if I'd seen her. I could have told him everything. I didn't. I gave him the same coward answer. Nothing I can confirm. He called me useless and walked out. I felt relief and disgust at the same time, which is a hell of a feeling. That night, I finally called city police myself. I didn't ask my supervisor. I called and said there's a suspicious vehicle showing up nightly with a deliberately obscured plate, possibly tied to a missing student, and I need an officer to run it and make contact. Before the cruiser even rolled in, the sedan pulled out. Slow. It rolled past my car at walking speed. The driver cracked the window just enough for me to see his face. It was my supervisor. Same tired eyes, same badge clip on his belt. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just mouthed "don't," like I was the one doing something wrong. The cruiser turned into the lot a minute later, too late to see anything but taillights. I tried to explain without sounding insane. The officer looked at me like I was covering my own ass. He asked for proof. I pointed at the cameras. I showed him the map. I told him about the key. He wrote something on a pad like he was humoring me. He said he'd follow up and drove off. Next morning, my access card didn't open the security office door. My name was already scraped off the schedule.